separated your deep ball from everybody else?
My deep ball, it has a little secret sauce to it, man.
Never get too high, never get too low, but just keep moving.
The whole story is Carlos never beat me in any kind of sports in high school.
Well, I do defer to, the smart people because I'm not amongst the smarter elites of the world, but that's why I defer to the analytics and some of that stuff. But a lot of that stuff to me is like, make a long story short, a lot of different times because black and orange Bengals get a bad rap on everything. I think it's very, very common that it's very easy for people to pile up on position groups that don't do really well. But there comes a time in a place, and if you study the history of the Bengals, they're always really, really good at the wide receiver position. I've been on record to calling them wide receiver university. But because that doesn't mean wins, I think a lot of people called me a homer by saying that I felt as though the Bengals were the second best core, just wide receivers in the National Football League. And the reason why is because every single tandem or every single trio or quad that I could find in the National Football League, a lot of them are either coming off of an injury or aging. It is a very rare scenario where you have companies like PFF charting 3 guys on slate, on target to get 1,000 yards. And then combine that with the actual fantasy football world that most people play, where they're drafting all of these guys around 2, 3, 4. Maybe some get down to the 5th. It's very few teams in the National Football League that can say that. Eric Eager would have you. What do you say to that or that argument, I guess?
And a former Bengals wide receiver writes my checks, so I'm certainly willing to sort of side with you guys. I know on your intro you had Jeff Blake, and Jeff Blake threw a lot of deep balls to Darnay Scott and Carl Pickens back in the day, and those were two great receivers. Obviously TJ and even Terrell Owens played for. So I think you guys have a point. It was really interesting preparing for this. I looked at receiver pairs, and I look at somebody like Boyd and Higgins. I've been on the record, like I'm a Boyd lover. I think Boyd is one of the best slot receivers in all of football. And I would put Boyd and Higgins themselves in the top 10 of receiver pairs. And so then if you extrapolate from that, so like who would be ahead of them in pairs? Hill and Kelsey. When you add Hardman to that, I don't think that's better than, necessarily than like I think Boyd, Higgins, and Chase are better on the average player's better. So like
Kelsey's a tight end. Kelsey's a tight end.
And Kelsey's a tight end, although he barely ever plays there. But you can sort of like look, the fact that we're talking about the 3-time AFC championship game participant wide receiver group and the Bengals, that's like a pretty good thing. You look at the Tennessee Titans, now they have Brown, Julio Jones, and I'm blanking on his name, the former Ram who almost signed with the Chiefs. But they, that again, I don't necessarily know. Like on the top end, Josh Reynolds. On the top end, I think AJ Brown and Julio are better than the Bengals' first two. But when you add that Josh Reynolds in there, I think the Bengals are in the conversation there. You look at Jefferson and Thielen, like Chad Beebe is not going to I think Jefferson and Thielen are both good, but Thielen's aging and Chad Beebe is not an NFL receiver. So I think the Bengals are better there. Godwin and Evans and Antonio Brown, Tyler Johnson, Jalen Darden from North Texas, and then Scotty Miller. I think that one you have to give it to him. Metcalf and Lockett. Like Lockett's a first half of the year player. Like I do, and I don't really know who's going to be the third receiver. So I think the Bengals are better there. I think you can make a case for Buffalo. I think Diggs, Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, and then you go all the way down even to the dude from UCF that scored 7 touchdowns last year, Gabriel Davis. I think they're a little bit better. In LA, you have Woods, Cup, and then maybe Deshaun Jackson, maybe Tutu Atwell. I think Woods and Cup are great. I would put them ahead of Boyd and Higgins, but not by that much. So like you start talking about this, and I do think they have a possibility of having a top 5 wide receiver core going into the season. And then when you think about it, adding Riley Reif, a guy who only gave up 1 sack last season as a member of the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously Jonah Williams coming back year 2 of being healthy-ish. More comfortability in the offense with Burrow. Oftentimes quarterbacks later on in their rookie deal will do a better job of thwarting pressure. This could be a good offense. There's no doubt about it, especially once you add in the idea of having Joe Mixon for 16, 17 games. That's a pretty good offense.